ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरुवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूप कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम्। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरु श्रीयुतपदकमलं श्रीगुरुं वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं सागरजातं सहगण रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्णपादान् सहगण ललिता श्रीविशाखामृतांश्च। नम ओं विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदांत स्वामिन्निति नामिने। नमस्ते सारस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे। हे कृष्णा करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधु जगतपते गोपेश गोपिका कांत राधा कांत नमस्तुते। तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यस्य कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। Hare Krishna. So welcome to the Manashiksha class. Yesterday we began the discussion on text 6 of the Manashiksha. Ore chet prodayet kapata kuti nati bharokhar sharan mutre snatva dahasi katam atmanam apimam sadatvam gandharva giridhar prema vilasat sudambodo snatva tvam api nitaram mam cha sukaya. Now, Raghunath Das Goswami is addressing the mind. Oh, ruffian mind, you are, why are you bathing in the trickling urine of the donkey, which is, dahasi? Why are you burning me and also yourself? Why are you doing that? That trickling donkey urine is compared to kutinati, kapata and kutinati. Instead of that, sadatvam gandharva giridhar. Gandharva giridhari refers to Radharani and Krishna. The prema which is emanating from their lotus feet, Sudha Ambodo Snatva, bathe in that and make me also happy and yourself also. So yesterday we saw a brief commentary of Bhaktivinoda Thakur where he mentions how this deceit, duplicity manifests in the Swanishta, Parinishta, which are the householders, and the Nirapeksha. In the Swanishta, it can manifest in 6 ways, in the Parinishta 2 ways, in the Nirapeksha 8 ways of duplicity. And we saw all that, if you remember the pictures also, we saw how the Swanishta engages in too much enjoyment of bhoga and too much preaching to the materialist, too much attracted to wealth and opulence, study of logic. The Parinishta, shows himself that he is very strictly following Varnashram externally, but internally he is attached to other things. And he is attached to not the association of pure devotees, but to materialist. And the Nirapeksha we saw that he is too much attached to things, and he makes an external show of devotion, but internally is attached to many things. He's attached to materialistic people, and he's exhibiting hypocrisy in the form of that I'm very advanced, and he expects others to bow down to him and offer him respects. So all this manifests in the Nirapeksha also. Bhaktivinoda Thakur has dealt quite in detail. And then he goes to how we should bathe in the nectar, which is emanating from the lotus feet of Gandharva Giridhar. And for that, he quoted Rupa Goswami's Stavamala. We discussed these verses. And he also quoted again the Radha Madhayor Nama Yugashtakam, where we sing the glories of Radha Madhav and bathe in that nectar. So we also saw the Manah Siksha Bhasha on that. So now we will today study the contemporary commentary of Srila Shivram Swami Maharaj. Very interesting commentary. Both this verse and the next are quite interesting in the sense that they deal with the psychology of anarthas or impurities within the heart. We will see how exact a science bhakti is, that it purifies these things from within. In this and the next verse, Raghunath Das Goswami will be using very graphic, strong language. It was very graphic, and you saw the pictures, the donkeys, passing, trickling urine, and you're bathing in it. So that's very graphical, and he's using a very strong language. Kapata kutinati bhara khara. You're bathing in a great ass donkey's urine, So he's using a very, very strong language. This is called contrast. So contrast is a principle which even Krishna uses in the Bhagavad Gita. If you do this, then this is the result. If you do this, this is the result. So Krishna doesn't say, like if you don't do, you will go to hell. Not like that. So he gives the contrast, and then he allows the jiva to choose. He gives that independence. So same Raghunath Das Goswami is using the contrast. You're bathing in donkey's urine. Instead of that, bathe in the nectarian ocean emanating from the lotus feet of Gandharva Giridhari. So this is called as contrast, which Raghunath Das Goswami is using in this verse. On one side, you have been burnt by bathing in the trickling urine of an ass, a donkey. And on the other side is bathing in the nectarian ocean of love for Radha and Krishna. So this is the contrast he is doing. Generally, such strong language is used in order to make a point, and specifically to make a point to people who don't understand a message in more subtle ways. So why is Raghunath Das Goswami using the strong language? To drive the point. Sometimes, we suddenly shout at a person, it shakes his existence and he awakens, his consciousness awakens. So similarly, Raghunath Das Goswami is using this strong language. Next paragraph. So this contrast is for us because we are infected by different gross impurities, and the result of these gross impurities is that we become covered by ignorance. In order to penetrate this ignorance, strong language is required. So that's why Raghunath Das Goswami is using a strong language. Maharaj gives an example. Just like when the child is playing, you tell him, stop playing, stop playing. If he won't listen because he's so absorbed, ultimately you have to raise your voice, and then it pierces through the child's ignorance. In the same way, Raghunath Das Goswami starts to pierce through our ignorance by using some strong and graphic language. Now Maharaj is going to elaborate that strong and graphic language. It's effective because it's something that we don't forget once we hear it. Why do you burn yourself and me, the soul, by bathing in the trickling urine of a great donkey of full-blown hypocrisy, and duplicity. So you just can imagine a huge ass because it is great donkey, and we take a bath in his trickling urine. So because it is a huge ass, it is going to pass a lot of urine. It's like a shower. Furthermore, he says it burns. Dahasi. Dahasi means it burns. This is the nature of urine. It is acidic. So we will address these things specifically later. In verse 5, we discussed Kamadi, the six enemies. And Raghunath Das Goswami says, Prakamyam Kamadi Prakata Pata Pati Vetikare, that along with lust comes the host of other unwanted characteristics. So these things need to be purified. But everyone has experienced that we do try to purify ourselves of unwanted habits, and it's not so simple to remove them. Like if you have some dirt on the floor and you sweep it up and you throw it out and it's gone. So we all have experienced that these repeatedly come, these anarthas in the form of fault finding and lust. They all, we feel that at certain point we feel better, but again, after some time, it manifests. But our unwanted habits are not such an easy thing to dispose of. So the question arises in this verse. Let's say I have subdued lust and anger, but what about deceit? It still remains. In other words, we are seemingly unable to get rid of all these characteristics. Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains there are two alternatives of this particular point. The first is you become a deceitful devotee. That's one's natural consequence, which means you don't purify the deceit, but you let the disease intermingle with your so-called devotional service. So you can choose. If you don't want to get purified and you don't work, that means you have decided, I'll live with it. I'll become a deceitful devotee and live and practice my devotional service. Then, while it's creating havoc to your devotional creeper, you are called a deceitful devotee. And when the damage is finally done, then you will no longer be a devotee. So this is one path you can take. The second alternative is to purify yourself of deceit. So there are only two alternatives. The first alternative we saw. Now the second alternative. This deceit is generally being described by Bhaktivinoda Thakur as any desire other than the desire to serve Krishna. So here Maharaj is giving a definition of what is deceit. Even this applies to the previous verse, asat cheshta. If you're doing cheshta, endeavor of activities of devotional service to please Krishna, then that is sat cheshta. But any other activity, then it will become asat cheshta. Then it will not fit in anya bilashita sunyam, definition of pure devotional. Similarly, any activity or any desire other than the desire to serve Krishna will be deceit. Very heavy definition. Which means, practically speaking, it's a carpet and you can sweep any material thing under this label of deceit. Any desire other than the desire to serve Krishna or having a purpose for serving other than pleasing Krishna falls under the category of deceitfulness. Falls under the category of deceitfulness. This is called as Kaitava Dharma. Dharma projita Kaitavo Paramo Nirmatsaranam Satam. That means having a desire for dharma, artha, and kama and moksha. Then it is Kaitava. Kaitava is deceit. So that's what Maharaj is actually explaining. He's referring to 1:1:2 of the Bhagavatam verse. Two specific characteristics of deceit are being mentioned here. Kapata and Kutinati. So in the verse of Raghunath Das Goswami, Kapata and Kutinati he has used, and Maharaj is going to elaborate on what exactly is Kapata and Kutinati. So Kapata is hypocrisy and Kutinati is duplicity. So let's see what Maharaj has to say about it. Kapat means deviousness and Kutinati is hypocrisy. Deviousness is duplicity also. And Kutinati is hypocrisy. That's what Maharaj is saying. In Chaitanya Charitamrita, these things are also described. Hypocrisy manifests in the form of diplomacy. That's what duplicity I mentioned. Mercilessness and meeting to gossip with others and criticize. All these forms fall under this realm of hypocrisy. Prabhupada in the Chaitanya Charitamrita gives a very beautiful definition of what is duplicity or hypocrisy. Heights of hypocrisy, he says that on a fasting day, that is Ekadasi, today is Ekadasi, you have decided to fast even from water, but you go inside an water, that is, you go inside a lake or a river, and you immerse yourself inside, and you take a straw, and through the straw inside, you are drinking the water. So this is this is hypocrisy. That's what he defines. So it is duplicity basically. Because hypocrisy means I pretend that I'm doing one thing or I am one way with people, but I think a completely different way about them. So duplicity means I think one way, but I do another way. I think about people in one way, but in my actions, I do some other way. That is duplicity. In other words, I behave to their face in one way, but behind their back, I do something completely different. And especially in Bhakti Vigyan Goswami Maharaj commentary, we will see the definition of simplicity. And by understanding the definition of simplicity, you can understand what is duplicity. So we will go to that when it really, when we go through that commentary. But Maharaj is also making the same point here that I behave one way in front of someone. Oh, this devotee, how are you? You're very nice. And you'll glorify him. And then when he leaves, you say, oh, you don't know that devotee, he has this bad habit, he has that bad habit. You criticize him. So I behave on their face in one way and behind their back, I do completely different. So this is duplicity. Kutinati it is called. Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains that there are three different classes of devotees and these elements, in fact, all different grades of devotees, unless they are purified. So there are these three classes of devotees, which Bhaktivinoda Thakur has spoken in his commentary. And now Maharaj is going to elaborate the Swanishta, Paranishta, and the Nirapeksha. Okay, let us see. From the very neophyte or the lowest devotee to the most advanced devotee, deceit affects and influences everyone. My goodness. Right from the neophytes to most advanced, deceit affects and influences. Specifically, Bhaktivinoda Thakur uses names which are not usually used elsewhere. But it's not uncommon for acharyas to coin terminology of their own or use terminology in their own way. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur has coined these terminologies called as the Swanishta, the Paranishta, and the Nirapeksha. Now, these terminologies are also coined by Baldev Vidyabhushan in his Gita commentary. But when he is referring to the Swanishta devotees and the Parinishta and the Nirapeksha there, he is referring from a very different, the terminologies have a very different definition there. And here when Bhaktivinoda Thakur is using, it is having a different meaning. So the terminologies, the terms might be the same, but the meanings change based on in what context they have been used. So here Bhaktivinoda Thakur is using in a different context. Now I'll explain the terminology used by Baldev Vidyabhushan, and so that helps you to understand where Bhaktivinoda Thakur is using here in a different way. Baldev Vidyabhushan refers the Swanishta devotees as those who are practicing Karma Yoga, practicing Varnashram and Karma Yoga. It refers to all, even the Sakama Karmis, the Nishkama Karmis, the Gyan Yogis, and the Ashtang Yogis. They are practicing Karma Yoga, and there is a little element of Bhakti. There is prominence of Karma or Jnana or Ashtanga. And the Parinishta he uses, those who are practicing devotional service, that is prominent, but they are also practicing the limbs of Varnashram in order to set an example to others. The Nirapeksha are completely detached. They are exclusively practicing pure devotional service. So that's how Bhaktivinoda Thakur uses, Baldev Vidyabhushan uses these terminologies of Swanishta, Parinishta, and Nirapeksha. Whereas, please remember, Bhaktivinoda Thakur is using these terms Swanishta, Parinishta, and Nirapeksha. All are referring to devotees who are practicing bhakti, not Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, or Ashtanga Yoga, where the Sanishta are referred. So it's all, all these three terminologies he's using for devotees only. Okay. In Rupa Goswami's Ujjalamani and other books, he also creates some of his own terminologies. Similarly, here Bhaktivinoda Thakur talks about three different types of sadhakas, saying that all of these three types of sadhakas can become infected by deviousness and hypocrisy. So the terminologies used by Bhaktivinoda Thakur is referring to sadhakas who are practicing bhakti. It's not referring to karma yogis, jnana yogis, or ashtanga yogis, which is the Sanishta definition in Baldev Vidyabhushan's Gita commentary. It is all these three types of sadhakas, but they are at different levels. We will examine the three different types of devotees and also see what type of deceit manifests in each of them according to the type of work that they do and what the resulting symptoms will be as they will vary. Now, Maharaj is going to go into, who are these three different sadhakas. The first one. The first type of sadhaka is called Swanishta Bhakta. The second is called Parinishta, and the third is called Nirapeksh. Swanishta is a householder devotee who is very much devoted to self-realization, to Krishna consciousness, because they are sadhakas, remember, but has the specific characteristic that he or she does not particularly act in the Varnashram system. So this is the definition of Swanishta according to Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He is a Grahastha, but he is devoted to direct Krishna conscious activities and he doesn't act according to Varnashram. This person's desire is simply to serve and satisfy Lord Hari. Which means, for instance, householder devotees who are residents in the temple who are really just doing everything that they can. So this refers to what is the terminology coined in ISKCON, the full-time devotees, which are the brahmacharis. Sometimes the congregation devotees, even the grahasthas, can full-time do voluntary service in the temple. And sometimes when they are retired, they can full-time, join the ashram and be there and full-time render service. So this is referring to them. They're just practicing Krishna consciousness and they are not acting as per Varnashram. Practically speaking, they are living like brahmacharis and brahmacharinis, having an austere and simple lifestyle. And even I mentioned that even the grahasthas, if they are full-time serving in the temple, staying in the temple complex, or it can refer to even those who are retired as grahasthas and full-time doing service. These are Swanishta Bhaktas. The Parinishta Bhakta is another type of householder who is also a good devotee. Such persons are dedicated to following the rules and regulations. They live at home and organize their life to conform with the rules of devotional service and make the worship of deity the center of the home. And the third type, a Nirapeksha Bhakta, is a renunciate, a celibate, a detached sadhaka. So now Maharaj has clarified all these three terms, and now he'll go into how deceit comes in all these three. These are the brahmacharis, brahmacharinis, sannyasis, and so on. Now let's see what happens to each of these three different types of individuals. So now let's see how the Kapata Kutinati manifest in all these three categories. The Swanishtas become contaminated by deceit when they indulge in sense gratification in the name of satisfying the Lord. This is also Bhaktivinoda Thakur mentioned the same. Indulging in sense gratification means that for the sake of preaching or performing other activities, they use the principle of Yukta Vairagya as a means of legalizing sense gratification. Now, this is a thing which requires a very deep study. Many times, a full-time devotee, say, I'm just giving an example, take it an example, say is a grahastha, he joins voluntarily full-time serving for the mission, and he has his bank balance, he's retired, and he is now voluntarily doing service. And now he has to, use the temple vehicle for the temple service. But then he has some services also, like, he has to go and fill his income tax or something like that. And he uses the same temple vehicle for that work. So in the principle of Yukta Vairagya, a means of legalizing sense gratification. So this is what can happen, subtly, that Swanishta can indulge in sense gratification in this way. So this is a very gross example, and it can go to subtler and subtler levels. It can go to quite subtler levels. I remember my neighbor was an income tax commissioner, and he told me that he used to use the office vehicle only for the office purpose. That is, it is to pick him up from his home to the office and back from office home. But when he had to go for shopping or anything else, he used to use his own vehicle. But most of the government officers, they use the office vehicle for all other purposes also. So this happens. So this is exactly what can happen also within the realm of the Swanishta Bhaktas in the form of deceit. The result is that instead of serving devotees, they end up going out to serve the rich and collect money beyond their needs. The symptom of that collection is that they themselves become the enjoyer of that wealth. They enjoy the association of the wealthy. They take personal benefit from the funds they collect from their wealthy associates. And although the wealthy may actually give the funds to such devotees for the institution, the deceitful Swanishtas use the funds for themselves. So he has given a donation of say 50,000, and you go and deposit 40,000 and keep 10,000. So this can be a deceit. And usually money is such a thing that moment it comes in your hand, the mind becomes criminal and it starts thinking in a criminal way. That's how it works. So you have to be very, very careful about it. Both, this is not only for, grahastas who are voluntarily full-time serving, it is for the brahmacharis also, and even for the sannyasis. Furthermore, with the excuse of education for the sake of preaching, they become attached to speculation and logic as the means of trying to make a livelihood and really give up the principles of purity, simplicity, and faith. So in the name of, preaching, I want to go and study Sanskrit, and they enroll and start spending time there, and they think they are learned pandits, and they come in the association of devotees to show that how knowledgeable he has knowledge about the Shastras. So when they start exhibiting that, then this is a subtle way, in the name of education, deceit can enter. The third symptom is that such a person may put on the dress of a renunciate, thinking, oh, I will leave my household life in order to increase prestige among the circle to whom he or she is preaching. So the deceitful Swanishtas become speculators. They become speculators. Okay, this is how Swanishta has been described, how deceit can enter. And it is practically the same discussion what Bhaktivinoda Thakur also spoke, but there is some elaboration. Next, if you have any questions, you can always raise your hand. The Parinishta devotees are deceitful when they make a real show of being a strict adherent and being dedicated to spiritual life. Externally, they seem to be an ideal, an exemplary person in the Varnashram system, but internally, they are attached to all kinds of material objects and sense gratification. So you make an external show, but internally you are attached. This is duplicity, deceit. This type of person is described in the 3rd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna says, so which is the verse? Krishna is speaking about such kind of a person. Externally, he shows that he is very renounced, but internally he is always, meditating on the sense objects and enjoying the sense objects mentally. In which verse of the Gita Krishna speaks about this? Anyone knows? Anyone? Yes, Birendra Yadav Guruji.
Hare Krishna Guruji, Dandot Pranam. 3.6 Karmendriyani Samyamya.
Yes, Karmendriyani Samyamya. Ye aste manasasvaran. Indriyartan vimudatma mityachara sauchyate. We dealt this in the Bhaktivigyan Goswami's Maharaj commentary also. And I mentioned what this pretender is. Externally, he is attached to sense objects, but he shows externally he is not attached, but internally he is always, meditating upon it. So this is the verse. Externally, they appear to be exemplary, but internally, they are indulging, making plans for so many different material objectives. Their symptom is that in due course of time, they become argumentative and always quarrel with the general mass of devotees. So, it's very interesting that how, you cannot hide, especially from Krishna, that you externally show something and internally something else is there. You cannot hide that from Krishna for long, and Krishna will expose you. So I remember many years back an incident where one of the young brahmacharis, he was very young, he was 10th standard and he had joined the ashram, and he was doing the backup, and he had, in the morning, there was gulab jamun in the feast. And usually devotees like to eat gulab jamun. That's nothing harm. So morning they had a competition and they ate a lot of gulab jamuns. And later on, they stored it. So that, others won't see it and, they wanted to have it more later on. So I saw that they stored it in some place, and later on, that ball was missing. And suddenly when it went missing, he started, fighting with the other devotees. You did it, where did you keep it, and all that. So when these types of argumentative things are happening and there is some quarrel happening, then you can understand that, it is because of deceit. Externally, they might show something, but internally, when they are making plans and their plans fail, Vita Raga Bhaya Krodha. Vita means one has to give up Raga, Bhaya, and Krodha. Raga means attachment. Bhaya means fear. Krodha means anger. So anger comes out, they become argumentative and they quarrel. So then you can understand it's because of deceit. Ultimately, they prefer association with worldly-minded people in opposition to devotees. They think actually these karmis are not bad. They have so many good qualities. So sometimes when we see devotees within the devotee community also, you might see that these devotees are having even bad qualities. And sometimes some karmis might be in the mode of goodness, and they might be very, you know, fine in their speech, very well behaved. And the devotees sometimes can be very ill behaved, and they might be not refined in their speech. So comparing the both, if you see from a very general perspective, it looks like these karmis are better compared to the devotees. But from a deeper perspective, because he's a devotee, he has taken up to spiritual life. Although these qualities are there, as he is going to practice spiritual life, and especially when he takes up to pure devotional service, all these bad qualities will completely be eradicated, and the good divine qualities will manifest. So it is temporary. Whereas this karmi, who because of his karma has these good qualities of fine speech, good behavior, truthfulness, all that, but since he is not practicing bhakti, these qualities might be there in this lifetime, but slowly he will degrade, because the modes of passion and ignorance are there, their effects will be there, and ultimately he will be bound in the cycle of birth and death, and he will glide lower and lower. In this life he might exhibit good qualities. So that's why Prahlad Maharaj says, Yasyasti Bhagavati Akinchana Sarver Gunes Tatra Samasate Sura Harav Abhaktasya Kuto Mahat Gunat. One who is Abhakta, he doesn't have any good qualities. So that's how sometimes we mistake. This happens in the neophyte stage when we do this comparison. And even I was caught up in this. And it took me a long time after discussing with many sannyasis, uh, that, I also used to feel that these karmis are not, but they have good qualities. And sometimes devotees, when we have experienced that, they don't exhibit these good qualities even in their behavior, we do this comparison. So this is how it can come. They have so many good qualities. It's unnecessary to really deride them. Why should we always call them demons and so on? Actually, there is so much that we can learn from them. And they think we should be spending more time learning from them than deriding them. So this is the logic, the false logic of the intelligence which gives, and it's better to associate with them. But this is how subtly uh, we can deviate and fall in asat sangha. And even if a devotee, his previous background is that he has been a drug addict or a drunkard, but he's taken up to chanting, we should seek that association. So that is how we should evaluate. True that materialists should not be derided, but on the other hand, too much association with worldly people, as Hiranyakashipu pointed out, will simply increase the severity of such persons' plight, and ultimately they will fall down. They will fall down. So this is what happens if you associate, then slowly, that association will have effect. The third devotee, the renunciate, when deceitfully thinks, I am a sannyasi, I have my danda, I am a celibate, I must be very elevated devotee. Because the nature of deceit is, of course, that you deceive others, but the extraordinary nature and very tricky part of this deceit is that you deceive yourselves. Mark this point. The extraordinary nature and the tricky part of the deceit is that you cheat yourself. And same is, sometimes the mind which proposes and you act based on the mind's proposal, the mind tricks you. So similarly, subtler way, deceit also, you think you'll deceive others, but you deceive yourself. Therefore, one begins to be extremely proud of one's position. An example of this deceit being taken to an extreme is that of Paundraka. Now, in the Krishna Lila, Paundrak is the classic example of deceit. Let's hear this very interesting story. He became convinced that he was the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The whole story is told in Krishna book. Because Paundraka was a king, everything was going well in the kingdom. He had nothing to do and he was bored. His ministers thought, how should we make the king happy? And they decided, well, why don't we start glorifying him like he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead and bowing down to him and behaving with him in that way? Certainly, then he will become very happy. So, this is what the ministers thought. Soon they came to him and said, oh, you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Narayan. You have descended into this world, Naradeva. You know, the king is called as Naradeva, the Lord among the humans. At first, he thought to himself, what is going on? But then he started thinking, well, they are my advisors, they are my ministers. Obviously, they must know what they are talking about. So, yes, they must be right. And come to think of it, I have some divinity within me. In due course of time, he deceived himself to the extent that he challenged Krishna, you are an imposter. Let's fight. So that was the end of him. So he, Krishna was Chaturbhuj and he also put two artificial hands and he went in a battle to challenge Krishna. And Krishna, when he saw, he started laughing and he just sent his Sudarshan Chakra and beheaded him. So in the Uddhav Gita, Krishna mentions, this is a very deep point, that how sometimes the sannyasis can fall down. It is mentioned that when the disciple goes and tells the spiritual master, oh, spiritual master, I was in trouble and I prayed to you. And by your prayers, I was able to come out of these troubles. And when the spiritual master hears and he starts thinking, oh, really? It is because of me. It is because of my purity, he was able to get rid. And he doesn't give the, credit to ultimately the parampara and Krishna. Then he really starts thinking, oh, it's because of my purity. Then that's the start of the fall down. So in the Uddhav Gita, this is mentioned, and in the purport also it is narrated. So this classic example is of the Paundrik. When we hear this, Nirapeksha, going back to the sannyasi, he considers himself very elevated devotee simply due to the externals of his so-called renunciation, expecting prestige and honor simply for wearing the dress of a renunciate. So I remember in one of the sannyas ceremonies, I was assisting the sannyasi in that ceremony. He was taking sannyas, and his spiritual master, who's also a sannyasi, who was giving the sannyas, and immediately after taking sannyas, both now the sannyasis, the spiritual master sannyasi and the disciple sannyasi were there, and the spiritual master sannyasi instructed the disciple sannyasi that now you are having this danda, and devotees are going to offer obeisances to you because you are a sannyasi. Don't think that they are offering obeisances to you. They are offering obeisance to this danda. Don't ever think like that. So this is how, he was instructing. That's the first, I also heard that instruction. So, this can come, oh, I am a sannyasi, people are offering obeisances. But what is the mood of a sannyasi? That Gaur Govind Maharaj in one of his lectures brought out that actually moment before a devotee or a disciple offers obeisance to spiritual master, the spiritual master offers obeisances to the disciple from the heart. Because, the etiquette has to be maintained because the disciple might be a Kanishta and the Uttamadhikari is a Mahabhagavat. So the Kanishta has to offer full obeisances physically, because by that he can get the mercy. And the Mahabhagavad, if he offers obeisance to Kanishta, then the Kanishta might think, oh, I am very elevated, and he might become proud. The sannyasis are always naturally humble, so they offer their obeisances deeply from the heart. So if we think ourselves very elevated because I'm renounced and I expect prestige and honor, then that is a kind of deceit. He sees other devotees as being very inferior, deriding the position of others. He collects objects and wealth beyond his basic requirements and necessities. In addition, as a result of all his association with wealth and worldly minded people, as well as committing offenses to other Vaishnavas, he ultimately starts to associate with women in the name of preaching. We saw that picture also. Yes, honestly, in order to preach, half of the population or more are female. Therefore, I have to also preach to them, he thinks to himself. So this is, the mind which, preaches to him. Oh, most of the population is female, so it is right to preach to the females. But he is not simply thinking like that. He is tending to preach more to women because he is attracted to them. He's attracted to them. His concentration and meditation becomes fixed on them. Therefore, he becomes overly attached to his dress and position of a renunciate. Ultimately, he becomes very attached to the members of the opposite sex, and in the meantime, he neglects his real attachment to Krishna. Once I heard a story, this is not a true story, but it's a good lesson. A sannyasi was, he was in a foreign country and he had opened a beautiful temple, built a temple for Lord Krishna, Radha and Krishna. And when the deities were installed, the deities spoke to him. It's not a true story again. The deities told that anyone, now go and tell the people that anyone who comes and takes darshan, they will go back to Godhead. They will go back to Godhead. So then he was excited. He went and he went to house, knocked at the door, and a kid opened. Yes, what is it? Please come and take darshan of Radha and Krishna. You will go back to the spiritual world. He said, I'm busy. I want to play. You ask my father. So he went to the father. Please come and take darshan of Radha and Krishna. Just by having darshan, you will go back to the spiritual world. You'll be free from the miserable cycle of birth and death. He said, I have busy engagements. I have to maintain my family. I don't have time. Then ultimately he went to the grandfather and said, please come. You're suffering because of old age. Please come and take darshan. You will go back to the spiritual world. You'll be free from this material disease of birth, death, old age, and disease. Come. He said, I am very busy taking care of my grandchildren. I don't have time. So like that, he went in the entire city, in this foreign city, trying to preach just to come and take darshan. And nobody was ready to come and take darshan. And the Lord had spoken to the sannyasi that if you take darshan, if anyone comes and take darshan, they will go back to the spiritual world. So then he came back to the temple and he started lamenting and telling, oh, Radha Krishna, what to do? Nobody is ready to come and take darshan. They are all, giving one reason or the other. What to do? So the deity spoke. Never mind, no problem. You come back to Godhead now. But I have to maintain this temple. Who will run this temple? So now he had become attached to the temple. So our real attachment, whether it is for Krishna, we have to see that. Ultimately, he falls down. So, Ore Cheta, oh my mind, Prodeit means rising or expanding, full blown, full blown. What is that full blown? This kapata and kutinati, deviousness and hypocrisy are still there, fully or expanding. Raghunath Das Goswami says that when you indulge in this thing, it's like bathing in the urine of a ass. He is using such graphic language because who in their right mind will want to bathe in such a thing? We get so carried away with all these externals, with the influence of this deceit and this deviousness, this hypocrisy, that we actually think we are doing what we are doing in spiritual life, the real thing. We are doing the real thing. Raghunath Das Goswami says, no, this is not the real thing. This is just an ass. What you are doing is entirely the wrong thing. This deceit is not what you are meant to be indulging in or bathing in, because bathing means to be clean. He's using a bathing example for both the positive and the negative, as he says, Bharakara Sharan Mutre Snatva and Sudam Bodo Snatva. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu uses a bathing example when he says Cheto Darpana Marjanam. We want to cleanse our hearts. It's a bathing process. Sarvatma Sapanam. And it's the same here with Snatva. This is the seventh effect of the chanting which is mentioned in the Shikshashtakam first verse. Chaito Darpana Marjanam Mahadavagni Nirvapanam Shaya Kairava Chandrika Vitaranam Vidyavadur Jivanam Ananda Ambudi Vardhanam Pratipadam Purnamrita Sadhanam Swadanam, sixth one. And seventh one is Sarvatma Snapanam. It's like bathing the soul in nectar. The holy name is like bathing the soul in nectar. So this is the same thing Snatva Raghunath Das Goswami is saying. We want to cleanse our heart, cleanse our body. So if we want to cleanse ourselves, if we want to bathe, are we going to use donkey urine to bathe with? No matter how much we bathe in that, with that, we simply get dirtier and stinkier, and ultimately no one will come near us. No one will come near us. So if you're bathing in this, you will see that devotees would like to associate with you. And those other devotees who are of the same feather, you would seek their association. Radha and Krishna are not going to come close to someone who constantly bathes in this type of thing. Such persons are not very clean. They are not very nice to be around. Beyond that obvious point, Raghunath Das Goswami specifically uses this example because the symptom of an ass is that it's a stupid animal. Raghunath Das Goswami is using the ass example because ass is called as a stupid animal. So sometimes when you want to tell someone stupid, you're stupid like an ass, you say. Who associates with a stupid animal and will bathe in a stupid animal's urine? Only another such stupid animal. Therefore, he is trying to wake us up. He's trying to wake us up. Why should we put ourselves in this situation? Why be so humiliated? The graphic language here is Sharan. He not only says that it's just urine, but he says it is trickling. It is trickling urine. Trickling means that it is a persistent drop, 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 drop. Raghunath Das, it is disgusting scene, and ultimately only a fool will do such a thing. Raghunath Das Goswami says that we should not be foolish and bathe ourselves in these things, thinking that anything good is going to come out of it. The last point that Raghunath Das Goswami makes about the donkey urine is Dahasi Katam Atmanam. We burn ourselves. Dahasi means to burn. Atma means a soul, which of course cannot be burned. The burning is that one becomes so disheartened or poisoned by deceit that it more or less destroys any opportunity for one's advancement in spiritual life. It is as if the soul is burning in a fire of deceit and hypocrisy, a very unpalatable and uncomfortable situation, detrimental for spiritual life. Now Maharaj is going to speak about the other side, bathing in the nectar of Radha Krishna's pastimes. So any questions you have up till now, what we discussed? Especially Maharaj explanation of the Swanishta, Parinishta and the Nirapeksha, and how deceit manifests in this, and the graphic explanation of bathing in donkey's urine. Up till now, what we have discussed. Any questions, any clarifications? Okay, so we will just take 2 more paragraphs and continue this discussion in the coming week. Okay, now the other side. But now he gives the other side, which is a very nice verse. Sadatvam Gandharva Giridhara Prema Pada Prema Vilasa Sudambodo Snatva Tvamapi Nitaramam Cha Sukaya. The contrast to bathing in an ass trickling urine is that we should bathe in the ocean of love emanating from the lotus feet of Shri Shri Gandharvika Giridhari, Prema Ambodo. So when you hear one and then the other, then certainly the choice is obvious. No one would want to bathe in the urine of a donkey and ass. No one will want to bathe in urine when there is a beautiful ocean of nectar to be bathed in. What is that particular bathing that we want to do in the ocean of love? In contrast to the deceitful behavior which we just learned in regard to these 3 types of devotees, there are prayers to Srimati Radharani by Rupa Goswami from Stavamala. So it is prayers. Reciting prayers, we can bathe in that nectar. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur quotes these prayers not to give us the contrast to the other undesirable and disgusting situation described in this verse, but also as a solution of how to become free from a deceitful mentality and hypocritical attitude. He says we should pray. We should pray to Krishna in a systematic process of surrender. Paddhati, that song was Paddhati. While we are praying, we are also meditating on the Supreme Lord, which may be done through the process of chanting the holy names. If such praying, surrender, meditating, and chanting are done with the right mentality, mainly humility, then deceit will vanquish from the heart and will never be able to re-enter. So the solution is prayers, reciting prayers in the glorification of Radha and Krishna, in the mood of surrender, meditating on those prayers and chanting these prayers with the right mentality, with the right humility. So today is, the festival which we celebrate, the Julan Yatra, Radha Krishna Julan Yatra. And the beautiful bhajan is sung by Narottam Das Thakur. Radha Krishna Prana Mora Yugala Kishore. And there is the Yugal Ashtakam. And there are Julan Yatra bhajans also. So when we sing these bhajans for the pleasure of Radha and Krishna, then we can experience happiness. We can bathe in nectar. Srila Rupa Goswami says, "O Radha, I offer obeisances to you. You have a complexion of pure golden hue." This is the verse explanation which already we saw yesterday in Bhaktivinoda Thakur's commentary. When we read this, we are aware of the comparison to Sharan Mutre Snatva Dahasi. Bhaktivinoda Thakur quotes more prayers from Sri Rupa Goswami, which we can read in his commentary, which we already read now. These prayers are a meditation to direct our minds from the duplicity of materially contaminated devotional service towards what is really pure devotional service. So these prayers are a meditation which will, which our bhakti, which is contaminated, and it will make it pure. One then learns how to meditate on Lord Krishna and Srimati Radharani. In Krishna book, Bhagavatam and Chaitanya Charitamrita, Prabhupada has given us so many beautiful pastimes, so many nice prayers and poems. We also have so many nice songs. I just now mentioned about the songs. All these are meant to actually invoke our meditation. These are not just books to be kept on the shelf and occasionally for entertainment gone through, but rather they are can be a constant source of practice. That's what a sadhaka is doing, constantly practicing. When people ask what our meditation is, we answer Smartavya Satatam Vishnu, Vismartavya Najatute. Always remember Krishna and never forget him. So Maharaj is now discussing that how we should bathe in the nectar of Radha Krishna by meditating on their prayers. So there is some more part which Maharaj is going to discuss in his commentary, which will require another class at least, maybe half a class, and then we can discuss Bhakti Vigyan Goswami Maharaj commentary, which is quite deep about deceit and hypocrisy. So in the next class, we will continue this discussion. We have finished up till here, paragraph 24. But next class onwards, we will further continue this discussion of what Maharaj has to say about bathing in the nectar of Radha Krishna's pastimes, which means basically the prayers. So any questions or clarifications anyone has up till now? The explanation is quite simple of Maharaj commentary. The point is very, straightforward, you can say. Still, any questions anyone has? Okay, Virendra Yadav Prabhuji, yes.
Hare Krishna Prabhu Dandot.
Yes.
Prabhu, this and Kutinati both exist simultaneously, or it is, it is either Kapat or Kutinati or both this combination. How it is?
Now, Bhaktivinoda Thakur has used Kapata and Kutinati. Kutinati is duplicity. Kapat is deviousness or hypocrisy. Now, the subtle difference between the two, frankly speaking, I also am not much aware. And it might come up in Bhaktivinoda Goswami's commentary. And let's wait for that. The subtle difference between Kapata and Kutinati. What is the difference? Even I'm not able to figure out, at least now. So let us wait for Bhaktivinoda Goswami's commentary, where we could see what is the subtle difference between the two, or is it the same? And there are different shades of it. So let's wait for that. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. So we'll stop here. Shri Manah Shiksha ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Srila Raghunath Das Goswami ki Jai. Hare Krishna.